Dear devotees, good evening to all. So today I'll be taking Inspired Talks by Swami Vivekananda. So in the last few classes, we have seen the following topics. In the first class, we saw that Swami Vivekananda mentioning that we have to transcend both good and evil in life. So that was the first class. We discussed this topic. So Swami Vivekananda says that it is every duty of the Hindu to transcend both good and evil and to transcend this samsara and finally achieve the goal of liberation. And in the second class, we saw the need to be in the position of a giver. So in life, we should always be in a position of a giver. Whatever be the circumstances, we can be in the position of a giver either in the form of service or either in the form of some other contribution. And in the third class, we saw that Swami Vivekananda emphasizing the need for courage in spiritual life. So the need for courage here, it refers to the courage arising out of the concept that man is the Atman and not this body. So this courage, Swami Vivekananda says, is not the physical courage. So this is the courage which arises out of the idea that the man is the Atman. So in today's class, we will discuss the concept of Nishtha, the concept of understanding spiritual ideals and so on. So we'll begin the class with a mantra here. Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. So in today's class, I will read to you a very interesting paragraph. It is very easy to understand. I will read, quote, Swamiji says, one-sidedness is the bane of the world. The more sides you can develop, the more souls you have, and you can see the universe through all souls. That is through the Bhakta and the Jnani. And he says, determine your own nature and stick to it. Nishtha, that is devotion to one ideal, is the only method for the beginner. But with devotion and sincerity, it will lead to all. Churches, doctrines, forms, or the hedges to protect the tender plant, but they must later be broken down that the plant may become a tree. So we'll repeat this paragraph once again for better comprehension. Swami Vivekananda says, one-sidedness is the bane of the world. One-sided means taking a one-sided view or taking a one-sided religious views in life. So if we see the current conflicts which are current religious conflicts or current conflicts arising out of religion, we can see the reason is that it is because of taking a one-sided view. So Swami Vivekananda says here clearly that one-sidedness is the bane of the world. So we must understand all the sides. And Swamiji says, the more sides you can develop, the more souls you have. And you can see the universe through all souls. So we have to understand the multifacetedness aspect of this religion. So religion is not a single aspect, and religion is not confining to a particular idea of an individual. For example, if I have to define my religion, I will say religion is all about bhakti and jnana and so on. But there are several different aspects even other than that also. For example, in religion, we find there are some ideals which have a concept of God, and of course there are some ideals which doesn't have a concept of God. I got it right? So in religion, there are so many sides are there, so many aspects are there. One particular aspect is to have this ideal of God. The ideal of God is one such aspect. And even without ideal also, religion can go. Religion chalta hai. So that is a point here. And Swamiji says here, the more sides you develop, the more souls you have. More souls, here it refers to the more methods or the more ways in which you can view the world. For example, if I am a Bhakta, my attitude towards the world, my view of the world will be in and through God only. So whatever activities I am doing in my everyday life will be in and through God. So I will start my day with a prayer to God and I will end my day with again a resignation or a prayer to God. So in and through whatever activities that a Bhakta does will be in and through God only. So his universe is completely defined by this particular aspect. So a Bhakta, for example, he thinks that God is the creator of the universe. So God is the creator, he is the maintainer, and again he is the destroyer of this universe. And he feels that the universe is nothing but the glory of the God. So his views are entirely colored, or you can say his views are tinged with the idea of God. So he sees everything through the lens of God. So that is the way in which a Bhakta sees the world. And again, for example, if a different person, for example, a Jnani, for example, he sees the world through a different lens. For example, for the Jnani, the world is Mithya. Mithya means it is totally unreal. It is not real. The world is unreal. So again, if we take the some of the other aspects, for example, Buddhism, for example, they see the world through a different lens. For example, in Buddhism, the idea of God is entirely absent. They view life as a kind of, they view this existence as a kind of suffering. So their focus, their view of the world is all about this suffering and to find a way out of this suffering. And again, for example, if we take the other religions, completely it differs. The view completely differs. For example, if you take Christian ideal, for example, he sees the world that he will be a follower of Christ, and at the same time, and whatever objects that come into his way, he feels that as a temptation. So he sees the world as I am following a particular deity, that is Christ here, and he sees the obstructions as a form of devil or an evil. So likewise, everything is colored by the religious ideal that we follow in life. So again, I repeat this point, this is very important. Suppose if you are a Bhakta or if you are a lover of God, we see the world in and through God only. So all our life and all our activities in our day-to-day life will be guided by God or will be guided by this particular ideal of God or Bhakti. So we'll visit temples, we'll do prayers, and we'll do everything which is connected with God. For example, and again, for a Jnani, for example, this world is completely Mithya. He says that Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, that is, Brahman alone is real. That Sat Chit Ananda is alone real, and this world is completely unreal. So we can see the change. One accepting the world and the other doesn't accept the world. For example, if we take Buddhism here again, we find that since the idea of God is entirely absent, they view the world, they view the existence as suffering, and in and through the lens they view the world. They think they need to find a solution for this problem and so on. So their approach will be different. So the religious approach will be entirely different. So Swami Vivekananda here, he says that we have to understand all these aspects. So we have to understand the different aspects which with a person with a particular religious ideal views the world. So it is very important, only then we will be able to understand his viewpoint, only we will be able to understand his ideal, and only we will be able to understand the motive behind his work, and only we can judge a person correctly. Otherwise we will be making a mistake. For example, if I am a Bhakta, I feel that the whole world should follow me only, or should follow my idea only. So we develop this one-sided attitude because of our limited view of life. And suppose if we broaden this particular view, if we understand different views, we will be able to appreciate each other, we will be able to appreciate each other's ideal, and as a result, we will be able to coexist in a peaceful society. So this is very important. So most of the time, we judge people wrongly through our ideal. For example, if I am devoted to Sri Ramakrishna, I would say that in life you have to follow Sri Ramakrishna, there is no other way. And if you don't follow him, you are doomed. So this is a one-sided view of life. So you got it? So similarly, this particular one-sided view is very dangerous, and slowly it becomes a fanaticism, and slowly you will become a religious bigot. A religious bigot means you say that this is the only thing which is right, the rest of the things are wrong. So you develop this religious bigotry and you develop this fanaticism, and once you become a bigot and a fanatic, the result is that you start involving yourself in different quarrels. You start quarreling with people of other sects, people of other religious denomination. You will start quarreling with other people professing to a different religion. So this is the beginning of a religious quarrel. So you develop a particular one-sided view, and later on you become a bigot, and this slowly you develop a fanaticism, and slowly you come into, when you come in contact with other religious denomination or a sect, right. In those days, our religious conversations were happening through these arguments and counter-arguments. So that was natural during those days. It is healthy to some extent, but it should not become fanaticism. It should not border on fanaticism. So that is the point. Actually, the story is... here, the actual incident was Adi Shankara, he goes to Kumarila Bhatta. So it was Kumarila Bhatta who argued with the Buddhists. So Kumarila Bhatta, he was born, there are many scholars' opinion, he was born in South India. So he was the performer of rituals, that is, he was more devoted to Karma Kanda of the Vedas, and he wanted to re-establish the Karma Kanda. And during at the time, Buddhism was spread throughout our country. So Kumarila Bhatta, he entered into a Buddhist monastery, and he professed to be a Buddhist, and he became a disciple of a famous Buddhist teacher, maybe Dharmika, I do not know the exact name. And after becoming that, once there was a conversation going between the teacher and the disciples, during the time the teacher, he puts a view against the Vedas, and since our Kumarila Bhatta could not bear that particular viewpoint, he sheds tears. So the time people were able to identify him that he is not a Buddhist, and therefore they decided to throw him out of the monastery. So they pushed him out of the hilltop. So during at that time, Kumarila Bhatta said, if the Vedas are correct, then let me not die. So that was his statement. If the Vedas were true, let me not die. But during his fall, he lost his eyesight. One of his eyes was damaged. And Kumarila Bhatta later said that he had doubted the Vedas in the form of this particular question. That his question was like, if the Vedas were true, he should have told in a different way that the Vedas are true and so I should not die. So he doubted that particular, his question. There was a doubt in it and therefore he lost his sight. So when Adi Shankara at a later date, when he met Kumarila Bhatta, he was taking this prayashchitta for insulting his guru, who was a Buddhist teacher. And during at that time, this conversation happened. And so, Kumarila Bhatta later, he said, you go and meet my disciple, Mandana Mishra, and so on. So, in those days, what I feel is that our religious conversations are happening through arguments and counter-arguments. So, these were absolutely necessary during at that time, because any religion, if you want to appeal to the intellect of the people, it must be foolproof. It must be without any defects. If a religion, if it doesn't appeal to your intellect, then it means it is merely, what do you say? So, even Swami Vivekananda says that if a religion lacks a philosophical concept, or if a religion lacks a foolproof philosophy, it becomes merely a normal belief. For example, if I am asking to believe you something, it becomes a kind of believing something without any concrete proof or without any concrete foolproofing, we say. Suppose if you state a particular idea, it must be foolproof. It must not be without any defects. Only then in those days, a particular religious viewpoint is accepted. So in those days, conversations, counter-conversations, arguments and counter-arguments were very healthy. But later on, it bordered on fanaticism. So that must be avoided. So the great gurus are not fanatics. We must understand that in India, Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, the great gurus who came, they were not fanatics. So they made religion foolproof by giving a particular philosophical system. So the writing of the philosophical system means they have to write commentaries on Bhagavad Gita, they have to write a commentary on Brahma Sutra, and they have to write commentary on the Upanishads. Only then a particular sect is recognized as such. For example, in India we find Advaita tradition, we find Vishishtadvaita tradition, we find Advaita tradition and so on. A lot of traditions are there. So how do we accept that this tradition is right? The reason we accept these traditions are that the acharyas of those traditions have written commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita, on the Brahma Sutra and on the Upanishads based on their system. For example, Shankara, he wrote Brahma Sutra Bhashyam, he wrote Bhagavad Gita Bhashyam, and he wrote commentaries on the Vedas based on his Advaitic viewpoint. Similarly, Ramanujacharya, he undertook this vast undertaking and he wrote commentaries on these three things and so on. So, in India, if a religious sect has to be accepted, if it has to be foolproof and if it has to be brought to the public, in those days, the acharyas have to write commentaries based on their viewpoints. So only then it is accepted. So it was very healthy. It was not a kind of street fighting as you think to be. It is not so. It was to make sure that religion is comprehensible, and it was to make sure that religion is intelligible, and it was to make sure that the philosophical system is correct, and it was to make sure that the philosophical system is free from defects, and it was to make sure that all the things are right. So there was a particular system which was developed at that time. So they followed that particular system and they evolved this system of conversations and counter conversations. So it was very healthy, I would say. So here coming back, we find that Swami Vivekananda says that we have to understand that all these viewpoints. So understanding the viewpoint is very crucial, and only then we will be able to appreciate others' ideals. So what is the religion that you are professing, and what is the ideal that you are professing, and that viewpoint I have to understand. So that is what Swami Vivekananda says. And again, continuing, Swamiji says, determine your own nature and stick to it. Nishtha is the only method for the beginner. So determine your own nature and stick to it. So for example, if a particular aspect of God appeals to you, and if you feel this is the correct religious ideal which I have to follow, then you take up that particular ideal. For example, if I am interested in Sri Ramakrishna or Swami Vivekananda, I should stick to it. For example, if I am interested in some other ideal or some other Godhead, I should stick to it. So determine your own nature. So nature, again, it can be referred to the combination of our gunas prevailing in us. Sometimes even our gunas, the gunas existing in us, it may determine the spiritual composition or the spiritual attribute which we have, and based on that we determine what is the right ideal for me. And again he says nishtha, that is devotion to one particular ideal, is the only method for the beginner. Suppose if you are starting your religious life, you must stick to one particular ideal. So it is much more advantageous, and it is much more easy, and it is much more natural if you stick to one particular ideal. For example, if you love a particular Godhead, so it becomes easy. So all our emotions can be channelized through that particular Godhead, and all our activities can be channelized in relation to that particular Godhead. So for a beginner, we have to choose one particular ideal. So most of the time it happens that we jump from one thing to the another. We find that if we do not get any results, or if we are not sincere enough, and if we are not courageous enough, we keep on jumping from one thing to the another. And these experiments can be done in the beginning, but after a particular period, it is essential to stick to one particular ideal. Otherwise, we will never be able to find this particular religious ideal that suits you. For example, if you are jumping from one spiritual tradition to other, so today you come to Ramakrishna mission, and tomorrow you go to some other spiritual institution, and the day after tomorrow you keep on jumping without any concrete results. And you will feel that your energies are draining away, and you feel that you are becoming restless, and you feel that you are not growing in any one particular aspect of, or you are not able to hold on to any particular aspect. So that must be avoided. Some experiments can be done, but it can't be done throughout our entire life. Throughout our entire life, you can't keep jumping saying that this is deficient or that is deficient and so on. So find out what suits you, find out which is natural to you, and find out what is easier for you. They call it the path of least resistance in physics. For example, in physics they say that electric current, it always passes through the path of least resistance. For example, even the flow of rivers, even the geographical pattern of the rivers, the flow of rivers, it is all through the path of least resistance. So you have to identify what is a path of least resistance through which you can flow very easily, which is natural for you and which is conducive for you, and so on. So once this is determined, you have to stick on to it. You have to hold on to it. Instead of jumping from one ideal to the another, instead of being restless from one thing to another, instead of not able to judge a thing correctly, stick to one particular ideal and you will see the results. So that is for beginners. So once you are strengthened in that particular ideal, slowly you will understand what are the ideas and aspirations of other religious aspirants. So once you grow yourselves, you will understand the needs and necessities, or the religious aspiration of the other person as well. And again, Swami Vivekananda says that churches, doctrines, forms are the hedges to protect the tender plant, but they must later be broken down that the plant may become a tree. So initially, for a spiritual beginner, you may need all these things. That is churches. Churches means here he refers to temples or a place of religious worship. And he says our doctrines are essential. And he says forms are also essential. So all these things are for beginners. And as you advance more and more in spiritual life, you will find the need to outgrow all these things. So you find that once you grow out of all these things, or once you become so strong that you feel that I can withstand without the need for any religious place of worship or doctrines or forms, and you have broadened your soul so much, or you feel the kind of oneness towards the world that you feel that these things are limiting you. For example, suppose if you belong to a particular church, or if you belong to a particular doctrine, or if you worship a particular form, it is all but limitations only. But these are all essential in the beginning, but again at the same time they limit you. Is it not? Suppose if I am devoted to this particular so and so form, this particular doctrine and church, I will be confining myself within this particular environment only. So I will not be able to grow outside this particular environment. And if I want to become a bigger spiritual ideal, if I want to transform this particular ideal into something which is much more bigger and much more higher, then I have to break down all these things. That means you are outgrowing your own limitations. You are coming out of your own limitations, and you are growing this out of this church or doctrines and forms, and at a later stage you will be able to accommodate the entire world. So that is the idea here. So in the beginning, we find that the churches, doctrines and forms are necessary, but at a later stage, these things may not be necessary. So if you take up churches, doctrines and forms, all these things are duality. So all these things are relating myself to you. So there is a relationship between the worshipper and the worshipped. So all these things are duality. So as we progress more and more into religious life, we feel the oneness towards everything, towards all beings. We feel this oneness towards the entire universe. And once you feel this oneness towards the entire universe, all the duality vanishes. All the forms vanishes. So you don't differentiate between forms, you don't differentiate between male and female, and you don't differentiate between this God or that God, and you don't differentiate between this doctrine or that particular doctrine. So you will be transcending all those things. So you will be transcending all those doctrines, you will be transcending all those forms, and you will be all transcending the need or the necessity for a church or a temple. So once we outgrow all these things, we feel absolute oneness with everything in the universe. So that is the culmination of spiritual life. So the idea is that in the beginning, the idea of duality is very much essential. So as we grow more and more higher into religious life, we find all our religious aspiration culminating in this Mahavakyas we call in the Vedas, that is Tattvamasi or Aham Brahmasmi and so on. You feel that I am this Brahman, so I am one with the entire universe and so on. So you will get that kind of spiritual realization. So during at the time all the forms vanishes, all the duality vanishes and you will only feel that oneness. So this is what Swami Vivekananda says. And again he says, the various religions, that is Bibles, Vedas, dogmas, are all just tubs for the little plant, but it must get out of that tub. And he says, Nishtha is in a manner placing the plant in the tub, shielding the struggling soul in its path. So Swami Vivekananda compares the forms, the places of worship or the doctrines or dogmas as only a tub. For example, if you want to grow a tree, in the beginning you grow it in a small tub. You place it in a small tub, you pour water, and later on you transplant it into a different area where it can grow it. So all these things are only for the beginners. So that is a nishtha. So initially you need a particular environment. Initially you need the concept of duality. But later on, as you progress more and more in spiritual life, you feel this oneness towards this entire universe, and you feel that you need to break out of all these limitations, and finally you realize that I am this Brahman, I am this individual, I am no more this individual, so I am one with this entire universe, I am this Brahman, I am this Sach Chitananda. So that is a kind of religious experience we get in life. And Swami Vivekananda says that it is possible for everyone to attain this religious experience, and he says that it is our right to get that experience. And Swami Vivekananda, he emphasizes that each one of you, he says that should become a rishi. A rishi means the one who has realized the dharma, or the one who has seen or who has experienced the mantra, or one who has seen the result of that particular mantra. So he says that each one of you should become a rishi for yourself. You have to test religion, not only test it, you have to experience religion. So that is what matters here in religion. In religion, hearing doctrines or worshipping forms and visiting churches, they are all only preliminary. What you need is that a concrete religious experience. A person must get it. So we have to strive for that religious experience. And Swami Vivekananda says that it is possible for everyone, and you have to verify the religion for yourself. So it is available, the religion, all the religious doctrines, all details pertaining to religion, everything is available. So it is only up to you to apply them in your life and find it for yourself. So that is a kind of freedom which we got in India, that we can transcend even our own doctrines. So in our Hinduism, we find that the literature of the Vedas, they are considered as secondary when it comes to religious experience. So religious experience is given a high priority. Even they say that you have to transcend these Vedas. I mean, transcend the literature form of the Vedas. You have to gain that experience, so that experience becomes paramount. So in no other religion, there is this particular viewpoint giving more emphasis for this experience when compared to the religious scripture. So we will revisit all those points once again. So Swami Vivekananda says that this one-sidedness is the bane of the world. So we have to understand the multifaceted aspects of religion. We have to understand everybody's viewpoint. Only then we will be able to appreciate each other's aspiration. Swami Vivekananda says that for a beginner, churches, doctrines and forms are necessary, but at a later stage, all these limitations have to be transcended if we want to achieve this oneness with the entire universe. And Swamiji compares this particular nishtha to a little plant in a tub, but later on this plant must grow, and so that it achieves the final goal. So this is the concept of nishtha. So concept of nishtha is something which is easier for your spiritual aspirations to flow, which is the path of the least resistance, and again, which is very easy to practice and which is natural again. So in the beginning, if you are a spiritual beginner, you must develop a particular nishtha towards a particular ideal, stick to it. Later on, you grow, you outgrow it. Later on, we become so higher in spiritual stature, we outgrow it. So it is just like joining a school in the LKG, and again you come out of that, and again you progress towards higher and higher standards. That is, you progress towards higher and higher ideals. So you don't sit only in the beginning. So Swami Vivekananda says you grow, you come out of it. But in the beginning, all these things are necessary. In the beginning, all these protections are necessary, but later on, you have to grow. So that is the point here. So we will continue this discussion in the next class about this Inspire Talks. So if you have any doubts, we can discuss here. Any questions? So we'll complete the class here. The mantra. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.